Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to increase performance, add muscle, improve body composition, and do all of it without destroying your health within a flexible framework. Today on the podcast, we've got Dr. John Russin, and we're talking all about his brand new book, which is out now, called Pain-Free Performance. Move better, train smarter, and build an unbreakable body. So big thanks to John for being on the podcast and talking all about how performance can be achieved, but you don't necessarily have to do it at the cost of breaking your body. So I've known John for quite a while, and it was always great to chat with him. We go over a bunch of the different principles in the book, even just some of the principles of, I'd say, kind of basic exercise physiology that tend to get lost in the process. You can get his book now, and it's on Amazon. We'll put a link to all of it below. He did send a copy to me, which is great. I did have a chance to peruse it a little bit before we left here for South Padre, Texas, and it is a monster. Very well laid out. All the sections are great. Extremely comprehensive, and I think you will enjoy it. A sponsor of the podcast, if you want more information from myself, make sure to hop on to the Fitness Insider newsletter. I will put a link down below, or you can go to MikeTNelson.com, go to newsletter, and you can get daily free updates directly to your inbox from myself. And then also, if you're looking for creative ways to do, I'd say, different aspects of performance, check out my friends over at Beyond Power with the Voltra One. We're down here in South Padre, Texas, as of this recording, and I brought the device down here with a little platform, and I've been able to do some basic exercises here just in their little rental place, especially for some grip stuff and some other easy accessory stuff. What I really like about the Voltra, not only is it portable in terms of having a kind of quote cable stack you can bring with you, is I really like that you can change the concentric and eccentric component. So for example, down here, I've been doing some testing of also isometrics with the Rolling Thunder handle for grip stuff. And then I can do a slightly heavier eccentric overload for it also. It's a really cool device, and check it out. It is an affiliate, so I do make a few bucks if you do pick it up through my link, but I really enjoy it, and I've been using it like literally every time I've been training in the gym or even down here. So it's actually portable, put it in the back of the SUV, and was able to bring it down here. So those are the sponsors, and without further ado, check out the podcast here, my buddy, John Russin. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing good. It's been a while since I think we've podcasted. I was going back in my memories on my iPhone, and I think it's like 8 years, I want to say, since we were sitting down at my house doing a podcast very much the same way.
Yeah, probably was. I think it was in your gym. That's cool. Are you still in the cheese land there?
Still in Madison, different house, don't have the epic gym anymore, but yeah, it's some better stuff. I'm a neighbor of Jim Snyder's now, so even better.
Oh, I don't know if that's better. Do you go over and borrow his gym then?
I only see him a couple times a year. He'll ride his jet ski over. We'll shoot the shit about basketball, strength and conditioning, and then I'll see him in a couple months, and we do that on repeat. So yeah, it's life of a coach.
Yeah. He's one of those characters where he'll like pop up every once in a while, and I'll have a few text messages, and then he'll disappear for like 3 years, and I won't hear from him.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Cool. So I know you've got a new book out. Like, why, for people who are listening who haven't published anything, one, it's a monster pain in the ass, but why go through all the effort of doing it?
Wow, that's a loaded question because it's not something that I ever like wanted to do. I'm like, no, I'm going to be an author someday. I want to be a New York Times #1 bestseller. That absolutely wasn't it. But I think over the last 8 years of running the Pain-Free Performance Specialist certifications, there was a need to go into a different medium for the education because we're doing these 2-day in-person certification courses, almost 200 every single year. And we kept on getting the same questions from our coaches. And then our coaches would get the same questions from their clients of, where do I learn everything I need to know about pain-free performance because this stuff's awesome, but I want to be able to refer back to it. I want to have the references. And I also just want to be able to hold it in my hands to be able to look at exercise variations, look at the systems, and simply know that I can go to a one-stop shop to get everything that I need. So all of this has always been in my mind. Like I always want to serve our coaches and our attendees as best as I possibly can. But in 2022, I got approached by a publishing house and I got approached by a co-author who I was a huge fan of, Glenn Cordoza, who is an
Hmm.
absolute legend in the field. He's sold tens of millions of copies of fitness and health books over the last 15 years. And he said, "Hey, John, I want to write this book with you. I've taken the course. It's fire. This is exactly how I train. Like, let's bring it to life." And naively, I was like, you know what? Cool, let's do it. And this is Thanksgiving Day of 2022. And it took us almost 3 years of full-time work to be able to like push this out, have it into our hands for the first time, and actually bring it to market and have people being able to experience the whole new pain-free performance in a written form medium.
Oh, that's awesome. Two questions about the writing of the book and stuff, since a lot of
Yeah.
people here, I'm sure you get questions about publishing and everything else in the fitness, and you've published tons and tons of articles. What did you underestimate and overestimate about writing a book?
I think I underestimated the amount of time and energy that would go into being able to bring an education system and all the articles and the resources and the podcasts and the TV shows and that I've done. And I was like, oh, it's easy. I've already done it all. I've already done it all. Let's just format this thing into the resource. And very quickly, I realized that I am a perfectionist. I always want to be able to elevate above what I've done previously. And that turned into, hey, we're going to go in and evolve the system. We're going to be going in and optimizing the messaging and the way in which we're teaching for simplicity and actionability. And it is totally different presenting on stage for 16 hours than it is having somebody sit down autonomously and read your content and read this book. So I think that Glenn and I thought, oh, this is going to be a little bit easier than we thought. We went in and the first thing that we did was we probably laid down a couple hundred hours of expert interview. Glenn had been through the Pain-Free Performance Specialist certification course before in person. We sent him to a couple more. And then we got 4 different iterations of pain-free performance that was on video, and we had him study those. And then all of a sudden, he was like swimming in transcripts. He was like, holy shit, there is so much. And every time we get on another interview, I'd give him another article. I'd be referencing T Nation and bodybuilding.com and throwing them over onto drjohnrussin.com. And all of a sudden, it was very intimidating. About 8, 9 months in, we're like, I think we need to go back at this at a totally different way. And at that point, it turned into, hey, we know what the structure is. The 6-phase dynamic warm-up sequence is going to be there. The 6 foundational movement patterns are going to be there. My lifelong performance style hybrid training, those programs are going to be there. But in order to get my voice and in order to get the most up-to-date aspect of what I'm teaching, we got to go back in and we're going to do expert interview and we're going to write this one section at a time, little by little. And that's what we spent the next 18 months doing.
Yeah, I think I had the same issue when I was helping Cal Deitz write the Triphasic 2 book. Is very familiar with the system. I'm like, oh yeah, like it can't be that difficult. And that was freaking 9.5 years. It took 9 years to get the thing done. And I'm similar to you. Like Cal's like, oh, but then I have this idea and I have this idea, and you're like, oh shit, like this all changed because I did the same thing. I'm like, great, I have all the videos, I get all the transcripts, I got all the articles, like it won't be that hard. And in the end, I don't think I used more than like 40 words out of any of them, right? It was like a good foundation, a good start, but then you realize trying to get your message across in a written form is different than live or even video or places where you have interaction. You don't
Exactly.
know how exactly it's going to come across. And I'm sure you've had this too, where you explain something and then you're like, oh crap, they won't know that unless they know this, and they won't know that unless they know this. And so you end up walking yourself back, and then to try to put it into a whole system that actually makes sense is, it's a lot more effort than I think people realize. But the good part is it becomes much more usable at the end then too.
For sure. And any great coach like Cal and yourself, You're always tinkering. The principles
Yeah.
remain the same on what you're teaching, giving the example of pain-free performance or triphasic training. The principles are there, the system's there, but we love to train, we love to coach, and we love to be able to find new solutions out in front of us with our athletes and our clients. And it's almost like you'll do a transcript, and then 3 months later, you're like, oh, I just cracked the code to this specific technique. And I felt like I wanted to make sure that if I did have something good, that everyone got access to it. I'm sure that's why it took you guys 9 years, because I can only imagine the conversations between two whiz kids like yourselves and going in and optimizing and adding more cool shit that works better and better. And that's why it takes so long, because I think when you're dealing with career coaches and people who really just give a shit about the people who are reading or training on their systems, that it becomes more than just publishing the book. It becomes, how do we give back the most to the people that are going to read and utilize it?
Yeah, because even now there are people who can do well monetarily wise for a book, but I would say the vast majority of it, even by the amount of time and effort you put into it, is not the thing I would recommend people to do if they're just solely worried about money. But I think, like you said, there's a benefit that it's, I don't know, maybe I'm old school because I still buy friggin' CDs and I buy books and I buy like physical things that you can have for a long period of time. And to, like, I've told people who are new coaches, and I'm sure you've told them this too, if you could do anything, is just buy someone's book on their system and just read it and get really good at it. Because a lot of, and I get it, like I was very poor starting out and everything else too, but I remember buying Super Training and all sorts of other books. That's Yorski's book. And it's always amazing to me that you can buy a book like your whole system literally in a book for not that much money when you
Yeah.
realize how much time and effort and sweat and reps and mistakes and all that stuff that goes into it. Like you can literally buy somebody's systems now for what comes out to be incredibly cheap.
For sure. And we're doing it more than just to get the royalty check on the
Yeah.
book sold. But I think for me specifically, like I was approached at the right time in my life, unfortunately. I had started Pain Free Performance in 2018. Between 2018 and 2020, up until COVID, I was really running it independently, doing 40 plus 2 day certification courses all across the world in a single year. And I was burned out. There's multiple times where I'd come back from a back to back internationally and I would just go to the hospital. That's how bad I was feeling. And in 2022, I was in that burnout phase. I was having some severe GI issues. I actually contracted COVID and I had full body poison ivy all simultaneously.
That sounds
And
horrible.
it was tough. So I was already running on red and I ended up having the poison ivy, which doesn't seem like a huge thing, but it was all over. Like it was
Oh,
70% of my body. And I had a course in Chicago, and me being me, I want to go out there, I want to present, I want to perform, I want to interact, and I want to network with all of our students that are out there spending their time, money, and energy with the pain-free performance system. And I go in and it was the toughest weekend of my life. I barely got by. Between 5 minute potty breaks, I was laying on the ground. And I drove myself to the hospital that day and I knew something was not going to bounce back. And I ended up in surgery about 6 weeks later. And it was one of those things that so many things hitting you all at once. And for me, I pride myself in health and longevity training. So for me to be struggling with these issues, it was really an eye opener. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to go in and continue the education the way that we had been in the past. Of course, now today I have a huge team of world-class expert instructors that travel. But at that time, it was the unknown. So you're thinking really grimly. You're out of surgery, you're deactivated for 3, 4 weeks, unable to do anything. I was unable to even walk down my street. That was my exercise for 3 weeks. And you're like, hey, if I don't make it or if I can't do this any longer, I want to make sure that the system that has helped so many people, certified so many coaches, has made a really big dent in the fitness and health industries. I want this to live on. And I was like, Glenn called me right at the right time where I was like not wanting to write a book. I'm already running multiple businesses and doing all this stuff and I'm burned out and I'm recovering and I'm in rehab. But that was the driver. That was the driver. I wanted to make sure that people could futuristically learn from this system that is essentially my life's work. And it's the compounding of all of my life's experiences in this field and out. in one 600-page resource.
Yeah. And I think people underestimate how taxing travel and presentations are. I love doing it, but COVID was a very interesting break where you went from doing it a lot, like previous 3 years. I looked at my schedule before COVID. So for 3.5 years, the longest I was home was 3 weeks in a row, which
Wow.
was great. It was all self-induced or something I
Yeah.
wanted to do. It was great. But then you realize going to bed and waking up in the same place each day, like being able to exercise when you want, having your nutrition more controlled. And there was a lot of negatives with COVID, of course, but it was a kind of an interesting break where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to travel so much after this. But I had no comparison until that point. And
Yeah.
you forget, because people listening are probably like, oh, you fitness people, how come you can't take care of yourself? But it's very easy to get in this thing of like, okay, I want to be there. I want to be at my best. I want to perform. And you do that for so long, it's almost like overreaching with even training. Like you don't realize how beat down you are until you take time off away. And then
Yeah.
you have that comparison. You're like, oh, crap, that was a lot more stressful than I thought.
Right. For my specific personality type, I run on red in terms of chasing those highs. And the highest that I can ever get is being in front of an audience that invested to be listening to me speak and teach them the
Totally.
systems. And that high turns into, hey, Saturday morning at 5 a.m. before I teach at 8, I'm going to go in and have a kick-ass session with a number of people right in this city because I love networking. And then I'm going to take that with a sweat on my face right into the seminar at 8, and I'm going to roll it through 2 hours later than it was scheduled to because I want to over deliver. And then I'm going to do exactly that same thing on a Sunday morning. And then I am going to be so elated that I'm going to be in the brink of tears when I say, hey, everyone, thank you so much for spending your weekend with me. And then you go from the highest of highs there. And I'm a high energy presenter. So I'm always like bouncing and teaching and almost yelling. And you go from that to getting on a plane and going back, and it's almost this high to high to a low of a low. And I think the nervous system goes from this peak potentiation down into nothingness in a matter of like 2 to 3 hours. And that's something that, especially with our instructors that are out traveling regularly 2, 3 times per month now for pain-free performance, it's one thing knowing the curriculum as an expert. It's another thing practicing what you preach with you and all of your clients. It's a whole nother thing of expertise to be able to be a professional presenter in a long form space, to be able to protect your energies and be able to mitigate that burnout, because I've been there more than anyone's been there, and it's not a great place to be. And then you can't continue to serve everyone who you're there to serve. So it's one of the central skills that we try to teach our master instructors today at Pain Free Performance is that you want to conserve your energy. Maybe don't go for that 1 RM deadlift on Saturday morning before teaching. Like that's a 101.
Yeah, that's also what I figured out is I had to modify my training, especially if I was teaching for like 4 days
Yeah.
in a row in Sweden or something like that. I would just do light aerobic stuff, some old school, just bro 20, 30-minute stuff. And that would be it.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't do anything heavy. I wouldn't push anything that hard. And then if I was teaching like Thursday through Sunday, like Monday would be an off day. I wouldn't fly back to at least Tuesday or Wednesday, do whatever I needed to get caught up on, sleep in, usually book like a float tank for like 90 minutes, not talk to a single human for like 2 days.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
I think where I ran into problems a number of years ago is that I would get done presenting. I'd go from that high to that low, and then I'd walk in and my son has basketball and I need to go out there and I need to coach the team and I need to work the rest of my businesses. I need to be a family man. I need to do all of my normal daily obligations on top of what I had just done over the weekend. And I think that placed me into the shoes of many of the clients that I work with today.
Oh,
I,
totally.
I transitioned from 15 years ago working almost 100% with high performance athletes to today, 95% of the people that I work with are over the age of 35. They're professionals in their lives, not on the field or court. And they're looking for health and longevity as a key marker to look, feel, and function great. And I was having to make that same transition as many of my clients are making today. And I think that when you can experience it yourself at such an extreme marker as I did, you have a better connection point to where somebody is currently at, the actual real life daily obligations that they do have between their family life and their professional life. And then how does training, how does nutrition, how does recovery fit into this to have a net positive with all the work that they're doing? And that's, I think in 2022 and starting the book and then continuing to manage the education businesses and all of my coaching, that was a big turning point to, hey, I have been moving in the health and longevity direction for many years now, but this is the direction that I personally need. And this is the one that I've seen most dividends pay off with my own health and wellness, that I want to make sure that I can educate people a little bit more deeply on those topics.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of it you learn by coaching people, and a lot of it is hard-earned self-experience, for better and for worse at times too.
For sure. There's something to be said about like, hey, the chick with the fattest ass or the guy with the biggest pecs is going to be the best coach for you because they have what you want if aesthetics is your goal, or the guy that benches 500 or whatever that goal set may be. But many times there is an element of practice what you preach model, especially when it comes to health and longevity. It's very hard today for the average person coming in for personal training or coaching at 45 years old, has 3 kids at home and a wife, and is traveling 2 to 3 times per month for business, to come in and trust a 21-year-old trainer who's doing 21s for their bicep right before they go in and jump into that personal training session that day. Because the life experience and the wisdom of navigating different elements and different seasons of life just isn't quite there yet. So I've always been a big believer that if you are a coach, what you have in terms of your expertise and your knowledge and your systems that you are going to be presenting to your clients, it needs to be so good that you can't afford to not do it yourself. And you are always going to be the N=1, and you are always going to be your first client. And that is something to be proud of. But I think many times people, they dabble too much into the hobby of health, fitness, and training, and they forget about the professionalism of the field that is backed on principles.
Yeah, and I try to look at, for coaches, like, not so much the end result, which is obviously important, but who have you coached at what level? What were they before? What were they after? What did they learn? And then more from a action standpoint, like, are you doing the things you say you're doing, right? Because everyone's going to have different individual goals and that type of thing.
Of course.
The fitness field is this weird thing where it's almost this unwritten assumption that everyone must train for max hypertrophy and body comp. Like, shocker,
Yeah.
there's like other performance things like people may want to do outside of that, and those things aren't bad at all. And you do have a lot of the sort of the genetic freaks that look well, but you see some of their training and you're going, what the hell? And I think those people fast realize that, oh, I can't do the exact same thing I did with myself with this client who may not line up, may not have the same genetics, may not have the same lifestyle. And that's where the skill and the art and the science come in of, okay, what do I do? How do I get them the result? Because they're paying me and they've got different circumstances and different things going on than what I have going on.
I think throughout my career, the big equalizer that I've seen between all different avatar types of clients and athletes that I've worked with is the healthiest are the ones that are going to thrive in terms of being able to chase down any type of goal set. Being in pain or having systemic health issues is going to be the thing that holds you back from having max muscular hypertrophy or maximizing your strength output or endurance or any other marker of success in terms of a goal set. And people ask me all the time, they're like, how have you guys done 20,000 certified coaches in person at Pain Free Performance in less than a decade? Because it's a shit ton. And I'm like, hey, we never biased against anybody. We always believed that we could have a strength and conditioning coach like Jim come in, and he'd appreciate it the same as a yoga instructor from town. And they'd appreciate it as a personal trainer that's been in the field for 2 or 3 years. And we could have a physician that comes in who's looking at trying to specialize into exercise prescription for health and wellness. And everyone can still appreciate the principles behind what we're doing in terms of the systems base of what we're teaching. Not a modality or a method, but a system that speaks to more of a well-rounded approach to training, to health, and to wellness. And I do believe that there is this big wave coming in our fitness industry and in our health industry towards health first fitness. Health first fitness is essentially like, let's ensure that you're a healthy human being first. You can move like a functioning human being, but also your blood test doesn't look like you're going to die the next day. And then from there, we know that we have the foundation that we can build upon to be able to go into general preparedness and then specialized preparedness in terms of a goal set. Many times today, like just with the inundation of so many sexy hobbies out there on social media, We have people skipping the health. We have people skipping general physical preparedness, and they go right to a specialty and they end up burned out, broken down, and hurt. And then they have a dysfunctional relationship with how exercise or fitness even fits into their lifestyle long term.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like the three tiers of fitness coaching, like the sort of the bottom or the tier three of just writing a program, having somebody count your reps, tell you what exercise to do. Yes, all that stuff incredibly important and super useful, but that is by far the absolute minimum. Like tier two is like, hey, maybe you talk about nutrition, maybe you actually, shocker, try to match your nutrition to your training. You do something like that. You try to account for a little bit of lifestyle. And I think where everything is headed, exactly what you were saying, is the tier one of, okay, I've got movement down. If someone's in pain, with not assuming they're not post-physical therapy or something like that, if it's a skill set I can deal with, we can modify their exercise. We can find ways to work around it. We can talk about nutrition. We can do some basic testing. We can talk about lifestyle, sleep. If they're not certified or able to look at blood works, they don't know what they're doing, they have someone who can look at it or at least give them some basic interpretation of stuff to make sure that they actually are healthy. They do have a solid foundation. And I think that is going to be fast becoming sort of the new minimum for what trainers are going to be responsible for. Pro or con, there's benefits to that, there's negatives to it, but I think everything is definitely moving more in that direction.
I think so too. So much so that we have an entire section in the Pain Free Performance book that is dedicated towards linchpin blueprints, which is essentially like, hey, this hurts or this movement pattern hurts. Here's your optimization plan to get out of pain and back into performance. And then we have recovery-based cooldowns, phasic cooldowns. But before we talk about any of the programming or exercise selection, there's this big graphic that says the triad of recovery. And it is training, monitoring your exercise selection, your volumes, your frequencies, the basics that we've all forgotten about. And then we have our nutrition. Oh, nutrition actually matters? Yeah, it matters a ton for recovery. And then the big one is going to be lifestyle, your sleep, your stress, your daily positions. That triad is so forgotten about because we all tend to perseverate on the sexiest of things, which is the shiny object syndrome, which is most times exercise selection or a specific goal-oriented program that is maybe a mismatch for that client's reality.
Yeah, not everybody needs to do lengthened partials of a bicep curl as like their main mover for their exercise. It's like, how about a strict bicep curl if you want to work biceps? That's worked for years. Chin-ups, basic patterns, heck, even throw some rows in there. Like that stuff is just, the basics are always going to work, but they're just not that sexy.
So if somebody has a PhD like you, like how much do you see that we have forgotten about just the general foundations of exercise science, biomechanics, physiology in today in 2025 versus when you were in school? Like how much do you think we've forgotten in our industry?
I would say actually, sadly, a lot, but it's also probably my perceived viewpoint if I only looked at social media. So if I only looked at social media, I'd be like, oh my God, this industry is a floating trash bin fire. This is a disaster. But the flip side is there's a lot of really good coaches that are doing really good programming. They're still interested in education, are still interested in getting better, are doing it as a legitimate, like full-time profession. And then they just don't post a lot on social media, or the stuff they do post isn't as sexy as this new whiz bang thing and you need to stick the red light up your ass or whatever you need to do, right?
I see the same thing, and it's the frame of social media is going to be the biggest driver of information today.
Sure.
We'd be naive to say that it isn't. And when we tend to look at end users and where they're getting their information from, we're seeing personal trainers and new coaches in the field. You ask them on a resume, hey, who are your influences in the industry? And then they list Instagram accounts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They don't list the certifications that they've done. They don't list the continuing education courses. They don't list the mentors that they've coached under for 6 months in a residency. They list the most popular person on YouTube with their 15-second clips, which is sensationalized content to be able to essentially sell something or get an advertisement click. And there's a big difference between social media and education today. I think that was another big driver of like a fucking book. There's no denying when you have a mainstream published textbook with everything that you know in it that, hey, this is not 15-second clips. This is deep diving for mastery and application. And it is, I do believe, a differentiator. I don't think a whole lot of people are reading today, but what they are doing is wanting to have something physical and wanting to have a resource that they can page through and get ideas from. It's almost like Instagram in the real world in your hands. Like that's the way we try to make it with some of the QRs and different features that we have inside the Pain Free Performance book. But similar to you, every day I'm like, man, I want to consume social media because there are great experts like yourself that I want to continue to learn from, or at least be able to deep dive in and have a resource to be able to click through to something better than just an Instagram post. But in the same point, I see that I get discouraged sometimes when I see a vast majority of like those high click counts or the high follower counts, or my son coming home and telling me about the next YouTube fitness guy is the one that are actually making the dents and making it harder for real coaches like you and myself to be able to just essentially help people achieve their goals and actually maximize their future with fitness being a part of it.
Yeah, and I think books and even online courses, if they're a little bit more lengthy, in person, definitely. I think those are all actually really good filters, for lack of a better word, to find the people who are still trying to be real professionals. And that's one thing I do like about going to live events and seeing people like yourself do books and old school type stuff, that there's still a lot of people out there who want the information, who are interested, are willing to put in the time. And similar to you, like if someone's at a seminar and they ask me a question, I'm like, yeah, I'll talk to them forever. If I get a horrible question off a DM, off of Instagram, and I can't find anything about this person, I try to get back to them, but I might not, because I know that if they bought a book, they paid for a cert, they showed up in person, like they put a lot of skin in the game, and that tells me that they're serious about it. So I feel like helping them, I know that they're going to be able to apply that information. So I think having a book is also a good way to take sections, to apply those sections over time. And then also, it is just for the people who are a little bit more serious, and then price isn't really as much of a barrier either.
For sure. I was posed with this question a year and a half ago, and it was some bigwig business guy who was coming in to meet with us at Pain Free Performance. And he asked a very interesting question. He said, John, why aren't you going after the 96% of people who aren't strength training in America today? Why aren't you going at the 90% of people that aren't exercising? There's a huge market there. Why are you going after the people that are already in the gym and maybe just not doing the right things in order to optimize their health or their performance? And it was very clear to me at that point in time that there's different layers of opportunity. And I think that we all have a certain duty to be able to give our information into people that can take action on it. And would I love to be able to help the 96% of people that aren't strength training today? Yes, but that's not going to be happening overnight. It's probably not even going to be happening in the next decade. If we could tick that up to 5, 6, 7% of the population regularly strength training, that'd be a huge lifetime achievement, but it doesn't really move the needle. For me specifically, it's those people that you see when you're traveling, you go into a commercial gym and they're there. They're there and they're ready to work and they don't know what to do, or they're doing the opposite thing of what they need to do to stay healthy or actually gain results. And I think that the opportunity point for that specific population that has decided that, hey, I need to make fitness and training a priority for me, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to do this to equip those people with the tools. I think that just vocationally, that is the number one thing that I tend to focus on with my coaching and then also with my education systems, because those people have already shown that they are there to be able to be helped. So I think that in terms of behavioral modification scales, they've already jumped up a couple flights in terms of being able to be applicable to some of this information. But I do think that long term, there is more opportunity out there to be able to impact like the deeper populations. I think something like a book can do that. When you sit down at a Barnes and Noble and you go to the tiny little health and fitness section
Yeah.
compared to everything else, you can grab a book and maybe somebody's walking through there and they see something that catches their eye that they wouldn't have found on Google and they wouldn't have found on social media. It's a new means to be able to bring it to a more mass population. And I think that with those people that aren't necessarily maybe training, maybe they're not training consistently, maybe they're not strength training quite yet, they at least now have every single tool to follow along. And then as they're following along, they can learn a little bit more about the methods and the modalities that make the system effective. But that is a big draw. Up until this point in my career, I've been very hyper focused on the people that are already there training, and we're trying to optimize their training. Now, I think the book opens up a whole new opportunity point to get people moving and give them the confidence and also the education to do it properly from the get-go, so they don't end up as another statistic that is hurt from training in the first 6 weeks, or that burned out in the first 2 workouts and just doesn't want to return.
Yeah, and I think that goes to, you can write a book like yourself that's very technical, but yet in a usable, laid out format that's useful, targeted to the people who are already doing stuff. Because what do they need? They probably just need better information. Like the mass market, you could argue, is more of a, almost a psychology experiment of, okay, how do we get people to take some action? How do we, whether you use the trans theoretical model or whatever model you use of change, how do we progress them to the next level? Because they're basically in the basement already.
It's that and then some. But I do believe, like, so when I say textbook, the publishers are like, don't say textbook, it's a book. Because textbook means that, oh, people aren't going to be able to utilize it, and it's not for the average person. This was 1000% written for the enthusiast, because over the years with pain-free performance, we've seen a blend between the professional and the enthusiast, and many enthusiasts turn into professionals, vice versa. People that leave the personal trainer or coaching profession, they'll train for the rest of their lives as enthusiasts. So I think these two populations are actually blending together. But when we tried to make it applicable and we tried to make it real, I think one of the things that Pain-Free Performance, our live certification courses, have always done very well is be able to humanize every single piece of content that we teach. And we ice break and we tell stories, and it's real, and it's my experience, and it's my life, and this is where the stuff came from. And we did that same thing in every intro chapter and every intro section in the book. So I'll be telling these stories of like aha moments all throughout my career. JL Holdsworth, a friend of ours, I have this story that I'm hugging him at the Spot Athletics in Columbus, Ohio, after being an absolute weakling next to him doing a deadlift session. And he goes, John, you're bracing. You teach bracing, but it's not right. It's not right. It's not right. Looking at me like, what the fuck? And all of a sudden he's like, you want to see something? And he makes me hug him from behind. And I'm like, okay. And then like JL has that huge torso on him, like made of meat. And he goes, and he like braces and it breaks my grip. And I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? It was like an explosion that happened across his torso. And he goes, that's how you lift 1,000 pounds. And then just like walks away and like grabs a drink between sets. And I was like, holy shit. But like different stories like that, I think like breaks down the barrier to entry for people to be like, I'm not Dr. John Russin, know-it-all, just listen to me. I'm like, hey, I'm a learner just like everyone else. I've had my own path and I've learned from so many different awesome people throughout like 19 years of my career to date. And paying homage back to some of these people and then these stories, I think it breaks it down where things just click. And it makes it be able to be tangible for somebody reading a book that is going to have some technical information in it as well. But it lines them up for being like, oh, that's why that's important. And I think that I can line up this next section in order to do what I think John wants me to do. But it's a lot different than a lot of the other books that have been published in the space, because when Victory Belt looked at it initially, we had the first couple chapters and they're like, this is different. And Glenn was writing it. It's like, yo, this thing's fucking fire. And I was like, no, this is the way that we teach the course. So I think the way that we teach the course is the way that the book should be written. And I felt really strongly about that. And looking at it now and a lot of the advanced reviews that are currently in circulation, people are like, holy shit, like you can actually read this almost like it's like a novel or something at different times. And that was the highest form of compliment, because there's nothing worse than a book that is dry and mundane. We've both spent way too much time at the university to know that, man, that stuff doesn't stick. You're going to know it for a dissertation. You're going to know it for your test out, and you're never going to really master it ever again because it was so fucking boring. But making things come alive, especially for that enthusiast in that coaching market, it was just so important to me, because I think that was another big reason for the success of Pain-Free Performance in general.
Yeah, and I think making it relatable is helpful and also somewhat entertaining. Like, as much as I love my research friends who have some very good stuff in their newsletters, holy crap, is a lot of it really boring even to me. I sit and read PubMed for fun.
Yeah.
So it's a different also skill set to try to write with information that's solid, that's useful, that has stories, that is entertaining. And I think, especially being more from an academic background too, and doing advanced studies, you get all that creativity, like just beat the crap out of you. And then once you get done, you realize, oh, obviously, if I'm writing something for formal publication, that's different. But for the vast majority of people who want to read stuff, like they're going to read stuff that they find at least passable, entertaining, has stories, and also has good information. I don't think you can do a book to more of the fitness enthusiast, more mainstream audience now that doesn't have those components in it, because just no one's going to get past page 2.
That's how I got my start, though. And I think that the feeling that I got, like 2013 is when I published my first article on T Nation. I didn't even have a website or a social media platform at the time, but I got that first article up on T Nation and I wrote it just like I taught it and I coached it. And people are like, holy shit, like, oh my God, like this is good. It's entertaining. It's got some tongue in cheek in it. The information actually works when I go and test it out. And I was like, oh, I'm onto something here, because when I was writing those articles, I was over working in China. And I had nobody speaking English at Chinese Olympic Village where I was working, and nobody was available for me to talk because of the time difference. I think it was like 12 or 13 hours. So I'm like, I guess I'm just going to write these articles while I'm over here. And it just like caught fire. But I love the element of being able to teach something that works. One, that's the most important thing. But then also bring some personality to it, bring some entertainment to it, and have people having fun as they're reading a 5,000 word article. Like, I miss those days so much. I miss looking at your articles on T Nation and looking at the guys back in like the early 2000s, writing this stuff like fire. It was a great time to be involved with that type of publication because they allowed you to be you. And that was liberating for me because I always coach with a lot of intensity. I always have fun in the gym. My athletes are my number one when I work with them. And that environment is always fun and it's entertaining and there's a lot of tongue in cheek happening. And I always thought like, oh, if I'm going to be successful, it has to look like my doctoral dissertation in an article. And like, no, it wasn't.
Nobody's going to read that. No offense.
Yeah, nobody's going to read it. And just going through and being able to have somebody telling you like, oh, this is good. And then catching fire with that. I think over like a 6-year period with them, I wrote almost 300 articles that they published.
That's
like
a lot.
It was a wild streak, but man, I think that was one of the key drivers of wanting to make the book. It's not quite as hardcore, pain-free performance book as what those articles were back then. But I think that there's something to that, needing to speak to that same voice and making it fun.
Yeah. And maybe you're similar to me. Like, I think after you've been writing for so long, like for me, yes, you want to get good information across, and you get to the point where that becomes a little bit more easy. But the part I feel like I'll never truly master is trying to get it across by trying to be entertaining, trying to have stories, like trying to make sure it all flows together. Like, to me, I feel like that art of doing that is just something I'll be doing for the next many decades and probably still feel like I'm not that good at it.
This is gonna blow your mind because I wrote all those articles on specifically on T Nation, like in the similar voice. It's my voice. People are like, how long does it take you to write this like 5,000 word article? And I said, usually about 45 minutes to an hour. And they're like, what?
Oh, that's fast.
What the fuck? And it would be something that's like you're sitting on, and I would write it in the back of my brain. I'd write my ideas. I'd have the catch lines. I'd have the different exercises that I wanted to feature. And I would go out and use it with my clients in the gym, and we'd be talking about it. And all of a sudden it's like, you have it done, writing it in the back of your eyeballs. And then by the time you go and sit down, it's already all there. This is not anything that I would recommend for anyone else to do. But I think that I was just sitting on so many of those things because I was an unknown. Nobody knows who the heck I was back then, that I just had a lot of things that I was doing that I wanted to share. And I was just like sitting on a stockpile of a lot of information, just knowing it so well that you can just spit it out, and then actually doing the thing every single day with your clients so you can spit it out in such a way and use some of the content that's coming through to make it more applicable and more relatable. That was the origins to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say are some of the top principles for someone who wants to train but not induce a lot of pain, because we know like pain's probably the biggest thing. Like once people are in the motivated stage, they're going to the gym, they're doing the things. I think you'd probably agree that pain or discomfort in a negative way is probably the biggest thing that's holding them up.
It is. And through our research over the years, it is going to be the number one thing that keeps people away from being consistent or consistently gaining in terms of their goal sets. But number one is just move like a human. Just develop a complete human movement system of what we were designed to do. And for us at Pain Free Performance, that's the 6 foundational movement patterns: squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, and carry. Squats bilateral, hinges bilateral. Lunge is a single leg asymmetrical lower body directed movement. Pushing and pulling can happen at a myriad of different angles in terms of overhead to horizontal, all the way down into the vertical in the opposite direction. And then carry is essentially just our locomotion of our body. Of course, we can do loaded carries, which is awesome, but we can also locomote our body in any way possible. We can crawl, we can jog, we can run, we can do airdyne bikes, anything that reciprocates the arms and the legs moving on that pillar complex. But many times when I bring in clients or I do audits of people's programs that are having pain points or having plateaus, I see that multiple of these movement patterns are deactivated right away. And these are people that know what they're doing, but sometimes they're not hinging. Sometimes they have no single leg in their training. Oh, they're only training the push and not the pull. Hey, you have no carry, you have no cardio, you have no conditioning, you have no capacity to actually have work being done. And these are the things that we start our audit with. But as stupid simple as that sounds, that gets people going in the right direction, because that is a complete movement system of essentially everything that somebody should be able to do through their youth development all the way up through active aging. And this is something that age is not a bias for. I do believe that everyone from my son at 10 years old who plays baseball, basketball, and judo, all the way up to my oldest client who is 84 years old, who still wants to golf and be able to ride his bike, they still have that complete human movement system predicated on those 6.
That's awesome. Is there any ratios or balance that you would apply to it? So one thing I did years ago, and I just ran into it more out of necessity, was some type of horizontal rowing motion. I realized with most clients, not everyone, there's always exceptions, I literally program that in almost every day they go to the gym, because I found that it was almost impossible, not impossible, it was very hard to make anyone worse, and almost everybody got better. Whereas pressing motions, most people probably had a history of kind of overdoing that, especially dude bros who want to bench every day they go to the gym. Have you found any sort of ratios or kind of words of wisdom of programming those movements across like a week, or how you would set up their program?
Absolutely. And I would say that over the years, this is the thing that I've taken the most amount of shit for by the science-based crowd, because you
Watch
will
out for
not
them.
find any research papers on what I'm about to say, but this is what works for my clients, and I'll repeat it to everyone so they can take appreciation for it. At the upper body, we like a 3-to-1 pull to push ratio, meaning that this is a rep and a volume base drive, and it is for every 3 reps of a row or a pull up or a pull down or whatever it is with the pull pattern, we want 1 rep of push. And this is built into the warm-ups. This is built into your prehab rehab and your cool downs, and of course your strength and conditioning. 3-to-1 ratio is really nice. And then if you want to deep dive in a little bit more from that, we want to have a 2-to-1 ratio between horizontal pulling or rowing to vertical pulling. Vertical pull example would be something like a pull-up or even something like a shrug. So that's for the upper body, 3-to-1, 2-to-1. You want to do a whole lot of posterior chain work, and you want to be able to alter the angles of pull. For the lower body, very similar. We see that many times people are just in need of a stronger posterior line. And we have a 3-to-1 ratio between hinging and squatting. And then we have a 2-to-1 ratio between direct glute work to direct hamstring work. And this is something that drives a huge amount of volume into the glutes, the hamstring, the posterior chain, and then a lot of hinging variations versus bilateral squatting. In my opinion, I think the 2 most accessible movements for every single person on earth, no matter their age, no matter their injury history or their demographic, is going to be the horizontal pull and the single leg pattern at the lower body. Split squats, reverse lunges, lateral lunges, things like that. We can have a huge amount of success there. And the best thing about both of those patterns it mitigates the risk of injury because biomechanically, we're just a little bit more sound from the get-go. And then when we actually tap into the neural skill component of doing single leg work and doing horizontal row based work, we really tap into a huge amount of strength, muscle mass, and the ability to actually utilize the body the way that I think it was naturally designed to. When we think about pulling with a single arm, training on asymmetrical single leg stances, 85+% of our movement lives happen in single leg stances, but it's usually the polar opposite between bilateral versus unilateral work that happens at lower body directed training. So those are the ratios that I like. And it doesn't mean that I use them for everybody. But if I'm going to put together a program that is going to be used by hundreds of thousands of people, I am going to have a gun pointed at my head to try to have success with the most amount of people. And that's the kind of ratio that I would do.
Oh, that's cool. One thing I started doing lately is for horizontal rowing, I have one of the Beyond Power, the Vulture One device, if you've seen that. And it's awesome because you can set concentric and eccentric different. And so like a simple progression I'll have people is like week one, when you're doing that eccentric, so you're taking 6 seconds and the machine's pulling you back, do a 5 to 10% eccentric and then go up by like 5% each week. And this would be more for, I'd say, advanced people, even people learning, like just having that longer eccentric, you tend to have a little bit better form. And in terms of biasing more of that horizontal movement, that seems to be working out pretty good too. So I think that's a little bit more fancy, but I like the idea and the principle.
Definitely. And I do think the big differentiator between horizontal pulling and single leg is that we're able to naturally tap into the body's asymmetries with rotation.
Yep.
Rotation is the name of the game when it comes to being able to optimize neural linkages of the kinetic chain, being able to potentiate power and transference of force, and when it comes to actually things not hurting. When you can allow the hand to rotate, the elbow to rotate, the shoulder to rotate, the scap to lead it, the thoracic spine to go into side bending and extension simultaneously, all on a single arm pattern, all of a sudden it's like, man, that just feels right. That looks like people thousands and thousands of years ago, like clubbing animals to death, like as their functional training. And it's like, there is something to that. The same thing can be said at the lower body. When we can add rotational components at the pelvis, at the knees and at the hips, and actually utilize that ball and socket based joint, which is a beautiful thing, it tends to spare the spine, hammer the muscles, and allows us to get into, dare I say, more athletic looking positions, which is a knee forward plus a hip hinge. And that is the definition of that lunge pattern that differentiates it from its bilateral counterparts.
Yeah, that's another movement I've been using a fair amount is take like a high pull point and then do one hand split stance. And then as you can start palm down or palm up. I usually start palm down. And as I'm coming back, I'm rotating to end palm up, like cross body in a bilateral stance. So you've got torso movement, you've got one hand loading, you've got that heavy eccentric pull at the end. And you're going very slow. You're not trying to do these violently. So obviously progress to where your tissue can tolerate it. But it's amazing how many people like that movement and how often a lot of their other weird kind of niggly stuff just disappears after a few weeks too.
Probably for like 5 or 6 years, I've been doing this half kneeling single arm row on a cable stack. And I go all the way into protraction and upward rotation of the shoulder blade. I allow the hand to go into internal rotation, shoulder into internal rotation, then reverse it just like you're saying. And then I have the opposite arm working in like the running man position to integrate the scapular mechanics on the opposite side. And then I have like 200 gym bros being like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen for lat hypertrophy. And then I have like NFL strength and conditioning coaches being like, man, that's a beautiful looking movement. And that's something that we integrate as well. And it's like, yeah, not every single thing needs to be an isolated hypertrophy exercise. Sometimes we need integrated movement models being able to be spliced in with some other direction, whether it be strength or hypertrophy, or even more symmetrical power.
Yeah, even with the clients I have that are purely just physique and a handful compete in physique-based sports, I still have some of those types of movements in there. I have lateral movements, I have unilateral stuff, skater hops and sticks. Like and at first they're, what the hell is this? This isn't for hypertrophy. I'm like, not directly, but we're trying to keep you relatively human shaped and move like a normal human. Because if you get too far away from, I can guarantee that your injury risk is going to go up. And if you get injured, you can't really train that specific thing. So like the movement you described, maybe not the best for extreme lat hypertrophy, but I think if you take that lens and I've worked with some of these athletes, like their odds of them having pain are pretty high, and their movement just doesn't look very good. It looks like a cobbled bunch of parts you just threw clay at, and just you look at them, and I just get worried that their risk of injury is going to go up. And if we, like you said, back to consistency, no matter what our goal is, if we can get to the gym and do it consistently without a lot of pain, odds are we're going to get to our goal faster.
I think that's the mission of pain-free performance, said very astutely by you right there. It's being able to just be well-rounded and known very well that not every single exercise or not every single training day needs to be hyper-focused on a singular goal set. When we can hybridize people's training programs, we keep them healthier, we keep them recovering, we keep them moving well. And then when time comes to be able to distribute more emphasis and volume towards that specific goal set, say it's bodybuilding or physique, then we're actually healthy enough to drive up the volumes and the intensities, even in caloric deficits and things like that, gets them to their goals healthier. And then my biggest thing is if I do have a physique athlete or somebody like that, yes, we want to get them to stage, but we want to get them off of that stage and we want them being able to be healthy and functional in their off season. And we can't just like burn the bridge after the show and then just hope everything's going to be okay in 3 or 4 months. We just need to be able to always have a bare minimum maintenance of all physical characteristics and all of your patterns.
Yeah. Last question, we'll ask you where you can get the book and everything. I know you've done several seminars with the great Christian Thibodeau, and any fun stories you want to tell in public?
Yeah, so you can get the book Amazon, Pain-Free Performance by Dr. John Russin.
Perfect.
Amazon is our go-to right now. And yeah, I had the privilege of traveling the world in 2016 with Coach Tibbs. And that was an experience because many of the different places that we went, we were not doing a whole lot of English speaking except for the seminars that we were giving. So we were in Poland together. That was an interesting one because we're in pretty good shape. We're both bald brothers. And when we went to Poland, there were coaches in our course that were like 270-pound sheer muscle. And they were listening to us talk about hypertrophy. And it was a weird translation thing because we're like, I know he wants to say something about how small I am and how big he is,
Yeah.
but he can't quite get it across. And that was the big laughing joke the entire time. But that was the start of my speaking career, working with Coach Tibbs over that year's time. It was a real big eye-opener, and it was an opportunity of a lifetime because previous to that point, the only speaking that I did was mumbling over my doctoral education courses and trying to present in front of my students and also my faculty. So opening up the ability to not only learn from a world-class speaker, but be able to travel the world and learn about what the fitness industry and what the sports performance industry was outside of the walls of just America. It was a great opportunity that led to a lot of different international things for me in later years and even today.
Yeah, I remember getting was it Black Book of Training Secrets, like God, eons ago.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I got from that book was obviously super cool. Like no one was writing about that stuff at that point, but it also almost gave me permission to be like, oh, you can go super hard down some of these areas and it's okay. Because at the time, like many years ago, I thought, oh, you got to be a generalist. You got to be able to help everyone else. And here's this book that's like hyper specific on all these different methods and stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's okay to do that if you want to do it. Oh, cool.
Gives you permission to just go train hard with the focus.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I would highly encourage everyone to check out the book on Amazon and your website still. I know you've got some stuff on social media. So where else can they find you?
All social media is at Dr. John Russin, Facebook, Instagram, also YouTube, and then Pain Free Training and drjohnrussin.com. Those are the two websites you can check out more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'd highly recommend everyone pick up the book for sure. And thank you so much again for coming on here to discuss it. It was good to see you again.
Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. A big thanks to Dr. John Russin for being on the podcast and sharing with us all his knowledge. And make sure to check out his book, Pain-Free Performance, Move Better, Train Smarter, and Build an Unbreakable Body. We'll put a link to it down below on Amazon. Don't make any money off of it, but wanted to support him with the book, and it is a monster. It is extremely comprehensive, and I think you will enjoy it. One thing I do like about books, especially for the end user, I haven't written a few. They are a pain in the butt to write and to do, but for literally not a ton of money, you can get all of that author's thoughts laid out in an easy to understand way, well, most of the time, at a very cheap price. So to me, it's crazy that you can get somebody's almost their entire complete system for 50, 80 bucks, 100 bucks, whatever. They're very great value. So check out the book there. No disclosures or anything else with that. Also check out my newsletter. If you want to be on the Fitness Insider, it is free to join. Go to MikeTNelson.com and we'll have a link there for newsletter, or you can go to the link below here in the show notes. Also check out our friends over at Beyond Power, the Vultra One. If you're looking for a kind of a portable cable stack that you can actually change the strength curves on it. You can do a chains mode. You can do an inverse chains mode. I like doing a lot of the triphasic stuff from Coach Cal Deitz. Obviously, I helped with the Triphasic II book, where you can do a heavier eccentric component automatically. And I think that is very useful, and the device makes it super easy to use. You don't need an app to run it. You can just punch everything on the screen. So the very basic with training, I still have old school notebooks that I write everything down. And a lot of times I just don't want to be bothered with my phone. So you can run it directly through the device. You don't need a monthly membership or anything like that. They have an online app that you can use if you really want to do that route, but it's not required. So check them out down below. If you have any questions, hit me up. It is an affiliate link. So I do make a few clams off of that. So thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Thanks to John Russin for being on here. Please leave us a review, thumbs up, subscribe, all that kind of cool stuff that helps with the old algorithms to get us more great guests. And if you could do us a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel, I will have a link for that down below. That would be great. I know most, probably 95, 98% of the stuff is audio. We're trying to expand the YouTube channel a little bit, and more subscribers as always greatly appreciated there. So thank you so much, and talk to all of you next week.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information. This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease, or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.